Sometime in 2017, inside a state-run psychiatric hospital in New York, a man sat across from a doctor and told the truth about himself. He said it was only a matter of time before he pushed a woman onto a set of subway train tracks. He wasn't making a threat. He was asking for help. He was telling the people whose job it was to keep him and everyone around him safe exactly what he was afraid he would do. Soon after, they let him walk back out the door. 5 years later, he did exactly what he said he would. This is the story of Michelle Go. January 15th, 2022, an ordinary Saturday morning at the Times Square, 42nd Street Station, one of the busiest spots in New York. The station is packed the way it always is. A 40-year-old woman, bundled up in a winter coat, is waiting for the R train. She is standing near the edge of the platform, not too close, but close enough to step on board when the train pulls in. Everyone's wrapped up in their own mourning, and so is she, looking down at her phone. What she doesn't know is that a complete stranger has slipped behind her. She had never seen his face. She doesn't know him at all. And she has no way of knowing that years before this morning, this very man had already described what he was about to do to her. She has less than 2 minutes left. Michelle Alyssa Go was born on December 29th, 1981, in Berkeley, California, the oldest child in her family. Her parents, Justin and Marjorie Go, and her brother Jeffrey would all describe her in the same way: dependable. The kind of person who was always there. Her father would call her the classic firstborn, the one who grew into the pillar of the family, strict but loving, someone you could always lean on. To her friends at school, she was charming. People adored her. She was smart, bright, and quick to greet anyone in the hallway. She joined the cheerleading squad and was a natural performer. And not only did she show a sense of maturity that went beyond her years, she already knew what she wanted out of life. Michelle wanted to help people, and she knew the only way to get there was to work for it. So she gave it everything she had. She excelled academically. She graduated from high school in 1998 as an Honor Society member, then earned a degree in economics from UCLA in 2002. After college, she took a job as a customer service and sales rep for Ferguson Plumbing Supply in Pasadena, work that kept her around people all day, which was exactly how she liked it. Then she finished her MBA at New York University's Stern School of Business in 2010 and worked at Barclays Capital before finally landing at Deloitte. The success never went to her head. Michelle stayed humble and tried to share the best of herself with the people around her. She was perfectly able to do well in her own life, but that was never the point for her. She believed everyone deserved a shot at a better future. And unlike many people, she actually backed that up with action. Through the New York Junior League, Michelle advocated for women, children, and families in at-risk situations and homeless communities. Through her work, she changed hundreds of lives. She'd help people understand how to manage their money, develop their financial literacy, and even help them to look for work. She'd review resumes, run mock interviews, walk people through the little tricks that get you hired. Because of her, hundreds of people were able to help themselves into a better life. Some homeless people were able to find employment that would help them improve their situations. Other people were able to start small businesses of their own. For people in need, she was a source of hope. And keep that in mind. It matters later, in a way no one could have wanted. Then, all at once, the source of that hope, the giving person who dedicated her life to helping others, was gone. And no one had any idea why. No one was ready for the news. Her family couldn't believe it when the call came. Michelle had been pushed onto the tracks by a stranger at the subway station. Her mother kept calling out her name. Her father couldn't stop crying. Every time he closed his eyes after that, he wondered what she'd been thinking in her final moments. Everyone wanted to know, how did this even happen? Who was this man? And why did he choose to push Michelle to her death? The answer starts on the platform in the minutes before the train. Just before 9:30 a.m. on that day in 2022, the man had allegedly been bothering other commuters. One woman, who, it's worth noting, was not Asian, told police that he came up behind her too. Something about that guy set off an alarm in her. She felt the way you sometimes just feel a thing in your body before your mind catches up, that he was about to shove her onto the tracks. So she stepped away. And as she walked off, she turned back, just in time to watch him do it to someone else. She got out of a dangerous situation by seconds. She would spend the rest of her life knowing it. Because as Michelle stood on that platform looking at her phone, she was totally unaware of the danger. The man slipped in behind her. The headlights of the R train were already swinging into the station. And then he did exactly what he told that doctor years earlier he was afraid he would do. He raised both hands, shaking, and shoved her forward, off the edge, into the path of the oncoming train. The impact was instant. She was stuck and then dragged beneath the cars. There was no time, no warning, and no chance. He looked around at the people staring, and he didn't seem to understand himself. Michelle died without ever knowing who pushed her or why. People rushed to the scene, and while everyone's attention was on Michelle, the man slipped back through the crowd and ran. The investigation started right away. The attack had been completely random. The two had never met, and Michelle had done nothing to provoke it. The evidence was solid. There was CCTV everywhere. Surveillance video placed him at the scene. Witnesses described a man who'd come up behind Michelle and disappeared into the crowd. And one of them later picked him out of a photo array. They pieced together what he had been wearing and his appearance, and a name came up: Marshall Simon. Though police would first release it as Simon Marshall, until the arraigning judge and the man's own sister corrected the order. His name was familiar to some of the investigators. They knew him as a troubled individual, but they never imagined he'd do something like this. The Marshall they knew was a man who just wanted to be saved. They worked with what they had, tracking his movements, though in the end, it wasn't necessary. He turned himself in. And he didn't try to hide from it. As officers walked him out of the precinct, he called out to the cameras, "Yes, I did." He admitted what he'd done in 3 separate conversations, with transit officers, with assistant district attorneys, and with the Manhattan office. He reportedly told reporters that he'd done it because he was God. When they looked him up in the system, they found he had no address in New York. So, who was this guy? His name is Marshall Simon, and he was kind and hardworking, at least at the start. He'd come to the US from Haiti, from a humble background, but that never stopped him from being a fighter. He was gentle, modest, and he liked helping people. He started working at just 14, shoveling snow for a little pocket money. Once he was old enough, he got his license, drove a taxi, and lived paycheck to paycheck, doing whatever it took to stay in New York. He loved the city, the buildings, the lights, the crowded streets, all of it. He'd wake up grateful just to have a job in a place he loved so much. Marshall worked his way up from nothing, made connections, befriended just about everyone he met, and eventually landed a solid job managing a parking garage in Manhattan. But then something happened that changed his situation and his future in ways he never saw coming. The man who'd built it all in his 20s lost it all in his 30s. He kept telling his sisters that he was fine and that they didn't need to worry. But he wasn't fine. According to his sister, Marshall said he could hear people coming after him. He'd mumble to himself and look around in a panic when no one was there. Finally, he had to be honest with his sisters and ask for help, just until he could stand on his own again. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia in 2002 and started receiving treatment. When Marshall found himself homeless, one of his sisters took him in. But he insisted on going back to New York. He had no place to live, but at least he was still getting treatment for his schizophrenia. Living alone with a condition like that is brutal, even for someone with a fighting spirit. His family knew about his condition, which was said to have worsened after his mother died. At one point, when he was receiving inpatient psychiatric treatment at a hospital, his sister, Josette Simon, begged them to keep him there. She knew he'd stopped taking his medication the moment he walked out. But even the hospital couldn't hold him long enough. You see, over the years, Marshall bounced between jail, shelters, and psychiatric wards. But here's a detail that lands strangely, given that he'd once driven a cab for a living. Both of his attempted robbery convictions, one in 1999 and one in 2017, were of taxi drivers. In the 2017 case, he allegedly climbed into a man's car, pretended he had a weapon, and demanded money. "I have a gun. Give me your cash." And the terrified driver ran. He was out on parole for that very crime when he killed Michelle, with an outstanding warrant for violating it. Police had logged at least 3 separate run-ins with him as an emotionally disturbed person. And in 2019, when he picked up a drug possession charge, the case was simply dropped, because even then, he had been found unfit to stand trial. So the system already knew him. It had diagnosed him, medicated him, jailed him, hospitalized him, and at least once declared him too unwell to face a courtroom. And every single time, it let him walk back out onto the street. But there is a part that's almost too much to sit with. The system didn't just know he was sick. It knew, in specific words, exactly what he might do. Because, as I told you earlier, back in 2017, Marshall sat in front of a psychiatrist at a state hospital and said it plainly. He was afraid that one day he'd hurt someone without meaning to, that it was only a matter of time before he pushed a woman in front of a subway train. But because it didn't seem like there was a clear, immediate threat, he didn't get any further treatment. Just his usual medication. He was released soon after. And this would prove to be a tragic miscalculation. 5 years later, on a Saturday morning in Times Square, he did the precise thing he had warned them he would do. Marshall was sent to Bellevue Medical Center for a psychiatric evaluation. It was determined that he wasn't fit to stand trial. On April 20th, 2022, prosecutors had him remanded to the custody of the Department of Mental Health and Hygiene until he was able to stand trial for what he'd done. He'd get the treatment he needed, and the case would remain on hold. If he were ever deemed fit to face a judge, it would reopen. The story hit the media, and people immediately started asking how someone with such a long history of mental illness could be out on the street without anyone helping him. Marshall had clearly needed professional care. He'd even expressed this fear that he would do something like this, and yet he remained free to kill someone. There were rumors early on too, when police hadn't released much information. Michelle had been killed during a documented surge in anti-Asian violence during the COVID-19 pandemic. And a lot of people wondered whether Michelle had been targeted due to her race. The concern was not without merit. In 2021 alone, at least 4,500 incidents of racism and discrimination against Asian Americans were reported. A lot of Asian Americans saw themselves in Michelle, and the fear only grew when, just weeks after Michelle's death, another life was taken. A stranger killed Christina Yuna Lee inside her own apartment building. Her case is often mentioned alongside Michelle's whenever people talk about crimes against Asian Americans during this period. In Michelle's case, it's not entirely clear whether or not it was targeted. The first woman Marshall approached that morning was not Asian, which complicates the idea that he was choosing his victims by race. Marshall never stated a connection, and police and investigators did not classify it as a hate crime. Still, the fear was real. Asian Americans living in this country, East Asian women in particular, said out loud that the threat of being attacked by a stranger felt very real to them. If it was Michelle yesterday, it could be them tomorrow. So people gathered on New York's busiest streets, holding Michelle's photo along with flowers and signs, calling for an end to racism. There were questions about the station itself too. People asked why there were few safety measures, especially along the platform edge near the tracks. In response, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority announced it would install platform screen doors at 3 stations as part of a pilot program meant to prevent exactly this kind of thing. The 7 platform at Times Square, the E platform at Sutphin Boulevard, Archer Avenue, JFK Airport, and 3rd Avenue. As of 2025, this pilot program has still not started, though metal barriers have been installed in some stations. As for Marshall, he spent 2 years being treated at a maximum security state psychiatric facility on Ward's Island. His doctors worked with him, and slowly his condition improved. Finally, on April 30th, 2024, he passed a mental health evaluation and was deemed fit to stand trial. Michelle's family's wait was over. The case that had been frozen for 2 full years would finally move forward. Marshall was brought in for a brief hearing, but it didn't last long. They didn't even get halfway through before he started screaming and cursing at the judge. According to his defense attorney, Marshall was still experiencing hallucinations and believed he was a supernatural being. The very same delusion he'd voiced 2 years earlier, on the day of his arrest, when he told reporters he was God. And so he was sent back for treatment, and the case was put on hold again. Reports said he'd refused to take his medication. Since 2024, the case has been stuck in limbo, waiting to reopen whenever Marshall is judged fit to stand before a judge. And perhaps the most painful part of this is how preventable it was. Marshall had specifically mentioned his concern that he might take this exact action. He vocalized his worries that he might push a woman in front of a train. And yet, nothing was done. He was not kept in a psychiatric facility. He was given medication that he didn't always take. He was left to wander the streets, and as a result, a completely innocent person was pushed to her death. Michelle's story moved people. After her death drew national attention, people started to see just how vulnerable women, especially women of color, can be in public. Her compassion and her commitment to helping others pushed a lot of people to step up themselves. Some got involved in charity work with her in mind, and it wasn't just individuals in New York. Her story reached people with the power to make real change. In May 2024, 4 U.S. representatives introduced the Michelle Go Act, which would let Medicaid funds cover stays at a wider range of psychiatric facilities. The hope was that people in need, people who couldn't otherwise afford treatment, especially those who were homeless, could finally get care for their mental health. The very kind of care that, had it existed for Marshall Simon, might have meant Michelle was still alive. Her name would live on through a law built to help more people fight their own battles. Many people express charitable thoughts and opinions, but very few turn these thoughts into action. Michelle was a true force for good in the world, and though her life was cut short, her memory lives on in the thoughts of her family, the people she helped, and the law she inspired. And this is how her family wants her to be remembered, not as a victim, but as a success. Her family lost their beloved daughter, their loving sister, apparently at random by someone who was mentally unfit to take responsibility for what he did. But they show the same compassion that Michelle was known for. They're not out for revenge. The way they see it is that Marshall was failed by the system, and as such, so were they. Speaking to local media, Michelle's father reflected on what he would say if his daughter could hear him one last time. He said, "I could have been there to protect you. I wish it was me instead of you." So, what do you think about this case? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And that is all for today. Thanks for watching.